Welcome back to Inside the Paddock. This is episode number 19 today for the Dutch Grand Prix. It was an absolutely chaotic weekend at Zandvoort. Rain came and brought us some unexpected podiums and some big crashes, and we are going to recap everything for you right now. Let's go. Welcome back to Inside the Paddock, episode number 19 today. And wow, what a race in the Netherlands this past weekend. Personally, I think it was the best race of the season. What about you guys? What were your thoughts on the Dutch Grand Prix?
I think by far it was the best race. I think it was just on a tier of its own, really. I think the second closest was just Australia, but it kind of reminded me of Germany from 2019 with all of the rain and all the carnage that happened. Obviously, I wouldn't say it was a classic, but it was definitely a fantastic race and definitely like the best of the season so far. What do you think, Tim? Sorry, I think I cut you off there.
Same thing. Really solid race. A lot of interesting things going on. You know, we had an Alpine podium. Alonso's back on the podium. All that good stuff. We got to see Liam Lawson in his first F1 race, although it's unfortunate that Ricardo couldn't be there. It's just cool to see young blood back in there.
I thoroughly enjoyed watching that race. I'd probably give it like a 9 out of 10. I think if Max hadn't won, it's probably a 10 out of 10.
I think it was like this race had the most overtakes in an F1 race ever of 186, which is just an incredible stat to think about it, especially considering the fact that before the weekend we had come into it was saying like, oh, Zandvoort, it's a very tight track. There's not a really long straight, a lot of medium speed corners, which traditionally they're not exactly the best for overtaking, but as we saw with the rain and all of the carnage that occurred, even on the first lap, that was an incredible first lap with all the drivers racing each other. And yeah, just a fantastic race all around. I'd agree with Charlie, maybe a 9 out of 10, maybe a 9.5 if you're feeling particularly generous, but I definitely wouldn't go lower than 9, especially considering the year or the season, how the season has progressed thus far.
Yeah, and I think we could go down and talk about how it was a big weekend for Max Verstappen. Home win in the Netherlands, which is not too surprising that he won another one, but it was a big one because it was his 9th in a row, tying the former Red Bull driver Vettel's also 9 in a row race victories. So there was some history here. It wasn't the easiest race to get there, but I think that this was a good weekend for it to happen. You know, home race. I guess the only thing that needs to happen next is for him to win at Monza and make it an even 10. But yeah, you know, he had a great weekend. Wasn't the smoothest weekend, but yeah, it just shows why he's a first class racer.
Yeah, I really thought that might be the end of Max's run right there for a little bit, and he just proved that he's as good as he is in the dry. He might be even better in the wet conditions, because I don't know if that Red Bull is necessarily has the same performance gap in those conditions as it does in the dry, but he made it look extremely easy out there, and yeah, I mean, just impressive for him to be able to, you know, just coast in the second half of the race again. Struggled a little bit after that last red flag. I thought maybe if there was a chance Alonso could get him, but after like 2 laps, he kind of ended that opportunity.
Yeah, it was just an incredible weekend overall. It's incredible, just to tie, Seb Vettel's record from 2013. When I saw it back, a decade ago, I think he broke the record in Austin actually back in 2013. And just witnessing it, I never thought that it would be broken so soon. And to see Max break it this year, it just gave me the goosebumps to be frank. Yeah, it wasn't exactly a perfect weekend for Max though, but it's kind of hard to have one in such conditions that we had this weekend. Um, the main thing was he just didn't really pit at the start of the race, or I think he waited a lap later, so he pitted at the end of lap two, and because of that, he gave up the lead to Perez. But then again, a lot of other drivers were struggling with those conditions, not exactly pitting at the correct time. So I wouldn't fault Max too much for that. At the restart, after the red flag, I wasn't too. I thought Max had it under control at that point. I mean, Alonso did have a run into turn one, but is what have been like kind of a dive bomb to the corner. So yeah, just an incredible weekend all around, and I just hope for the sake of the record, he can break the Seb's record in Monza next weekend. But I don't want to jinx anything, so I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah. The one thing with Max is that I don't know if Perez would have won the race, but Red Bull did kind of screw Perez over. I feel like with the pit stops in the middle of the race, and I think Checo is around like 4 seconds ahead or so. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then he ended up coming up behind Max, and Max was catching him very quickly. He was at one point like 11 seconds behind him, but you never know with the rain coming and all that. And Checo did look pretty decent in the dry, at least, and at the start. He just made that one mistake towards the end. So I don't know if Perez would have won, but it's just kind of, I wish they had let him kind of handle it on the track rather than.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
Yeah, I agree with you. But yeah, I think the better question in that case is, just kind of asking along what you were saying, Charlie, is does it really matter? As you mentioned, Max started that start of the interphase 12 seconds behind, and by the end of it, he was like, I think 3 or 4 seconds away. So just considering the fact that Perez isn't too confident in that car, at least as not as confident as Max is, considering the fact that Max is one of the best weather drivers on the grid. Perez made a couple mistakes towards the end, crashing into the wall at the end of turn one. I think with all that being said, I don't think Perez really had a chance. And to be frank, I don't think anyone has a chance right now against Max Verstappen without a mechanical failure on Red Bull's end. So to be frank, I don't think it really would have mattered. And I think there's definitely reasons for Red Bull to have pitted Max before they did Perez, especially considering the fact that Alonso was pitted the lap before, I believe, and there was a chance of an undercut. So, yeah, again, I would just repeat, I don't think it matters. Max probably would still have won.
Yeah, I guess moving down the line, the rest of the other two podium spots, I don't think any of us, or a couple of us guessed Alonso on the podium, neither of us in second place. And then Gasly, first off, Alonso, just an excellent recovery race, given that he's been, or Aston Martin as a whole has just been poor lately. Although we can't really say it was a bounce back for Aston Martin because of Stroll's continued woes, sitting down out of the points again, which I guess we can talk more about later. But, even with that poor stop, which put him, which lost him track position, he still came out and he put together a really solid race. Of course he has the experience, so he's been through a lot. And out of any of the drivers, I don't think any of us were surprised that he was one of the drivers that did particularly well. But it was just really I was really glad to see him back up there and fighting for something other than like a P6 or 7.
Yeah, and he got off to a great start. Went down at that very steeply banked, I think turn 4. It might have been on Albon or Russell on lap 1. Just went to the lower line and passed one of them. Got past Norris in the super tricky conditions up at the front, and was really in a net P2 ever from that point on, I guess, and then Perez crashed or went off, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see Aston Martin and Alonso kind of come back to their start of season form and just make those battles for the podium even more interesting with McLaren and Mercedes on their weekends respectively, even Ferrari. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a great bounce back, and as Tim alluded to, like if anyone on the grid was going to do well in these conditions, it was going to be Alonso or it was going to be Hamilton, and in this weekend it was Alonso. So I'm not really surprised, especially. But that first lap there was incredible, especially with the rain falling, and as Charlie mentioned, him getting past Albon, Norris, all those drivers. That was just incredible driving, and it speaks to the skill that Alonso has. Yeah, kind of obvious, but I hope that he can stay around for the next few years, though. I know there's a lot of talk about the fact that Alonso should give up his seat for some young drivers to come in, but I just want to see what Alonso can do, and I don't think he'll win a championship, to be frank, in the next couple of years, but he's a great personality, especially now, and it's great to see him enjoying the sport, unlike the way he ended it back in 2018 with McLaren.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sorry.
It's funny enough, I feel like he'd be the one to keep the seat if it came down to the two Aston Martin drivers, even with his age.
Yeah, and especially considering how popular he is now, I think a good metaphor for the way that Alonso is perceived in the community now is kind of just looking at Vettel from a couple of years ago. We know that Vettel was disliked, let's put it that way, for the success at Red Bull. But once he moved to Ferrari, it seems like the F1 community in particular kind of flipped on that. And I think that's kind of what's happening with Alonso. So, yeah, just seeing how badly Stroll is performing. Yes, his dad is in charge of that team, but at some point you kind of have to cut your losses. That's millions of dollars lost every year if you're not finishing, above Mercedes, stuff like that. So if it comes down to it, I think Stroll is the one getting dropped on that team.
And I think the last thing any of us saw coming was an Alpine podium, but Pierre Gasly, to his credit, gets on the podium for the first time since, I believe, Baku in 2021 in the AlphaTauri. He really had a good race. I mean, he had a penalty at one point, had to take 5 extra seconds in the pit lane, but it ended up being the bad timing on the penalty for Perez that promoted him to that last podium spot. And that Alpine did look pretty good at times in the race. So sometimes it didn't look that great, but he did what he needed to do to get a podium. So credit to Gasly.
And it was a well-needed result for Alpine as well, considering the streak of woe they've been on, if you can call it that, especially in Belgium and in Hungary, DNFing, I think 4 times in a row. So it's great to see them that they're competitive. I kind of feel for Ocon. I know we'll touch on him later, but I kind of feel bad for him because we saw him move onto those wet tires prior to the red flag, and we saw his pace. And you have to wonder if the race continues at that point, does he go higher? Does Alpine, do they have a better weekend than they have already with Gasly? A lot of unanswered questions, but yeah, still a very good weekend from Alpine and a great bounce back. I think we were talking about it, or at least I was suggesting it, but last weekend, I think last weekend I brought up the possibility that Williams might be able to challenge Alpine. I think that's basically over if it ever existed. So I think Alpine are pretty much locked in for that spot if they weren't already.
Yeah. Fourth place was Sergio Perez. Again, a disappointing qualifying, but him being in second, being the driver or second in the team, he was kind of the one they could experiment with, and they got it completely right, at least at the start. And he was comfortably in first for a while, until the switch from inters to, I think, just softs, kind of middle of the race. So, I mean, and then obviously the penalty and the crash at the end. So it was another weird weekend for Perez. Obviously a little bit of a better result compared to some of his this season, but he's still just making mistakes that not really costing the team or him really. He should still be able to comfortably get second, but it's just strange.
Yeah, I don't know. He's at the start of the season he looked solid. Even this past weekend, I guess what I've been thinking is the only person that can take a win from Max at this point, without anything crazy happening like a crash, would be Perez, and we saw that happen at the start of the year. There were talks, although it was only for like a weekend, of whether or not he could keep up with Max, and we said no, and obviously he's way behind. But I don't know, he just although it is unfortunate what happened to him, it also just he didn't put himself in the right position to start with that 7th place in qualifying, where he should be up there in second or maybe grabbing a pole or two every once in a while. So yeah, he's just been driving very like sloppily, I guess, if that's the right word for it. And yeah, I was hoping to see more out of him. My hope is pretty much lost at this point, though. But I guess, Kenji, what are your thoughts? I know this is your team, so I'm sure you have something to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the same thing I've been saying. It's just a confidence problem. Ever since that crash he had in Monaco, it's really just gone downhill for him. And unfortunately, I don't think that this weekend will do anything positive for his confidence. Obviously, if you go from winning the race by 12 seconds to just ending up in the wall and stuff, I don't think that's very good for your confidence. I was hoping that after the summer break, he would have kind of switched up his mindset a bit and gone back perhaps to what he had at the beginning of the season. But unfortunately, like I said, I don't think this weekend did anything good for his confidence. So, yeah, we know Perez is a great driver, but at this point, I don't know, maybe he needs some time off or something. We just had time off, so I don't really know what to do with Perez at this point. Yeah, I don't have much more to add.
Yeah.
Do you guys think he's at risk for next year through some unlikely chance?
I especially don't now that Ricardo is hurt. I don't know how long he'll be out, but I think they would only replace him with Ricardo, at least from their own kind of team or farm system. But you never know. I think they're easily going to win the Constructors, so he's doing what they need of him, but he could score negative points and they'd win the Constructors right now. So I don't know. It's really up to Red Bull and how dominant and how good they want their team to be. Moving down, cover the Ferrari team, and it was kind of a tale of two different stories for Ferrari. Sainz had a solid race, some good action with Gasly and Alonso, but Leclerc almost immediately just was like taken out, and I don't really know if it was Ferrari's fault, but like Leclerc pits after the rain starts falling on lap 1. The tires aren't there. So, and I heard the announcers talking about this, that Leclerc told them he was coming in like as he entered the pit lane. But so it's kind of not really entirely the team's fault, but at the same time, if you're seeing that the rain is coming down, you should probably be like at least ready to go get the tires. So it's on Leclerc and it's on the team. It's just classic Ferrari blunders, I guess. And he just had a horrible race. So
Yeah, I would put more of the blame on the team, especially considering what you said, Charlie. First of all, they have access to the radar. They have access to the cameras. They have access to all of the strategists, which, to be frank, at Ferrari are kind of bad. But if you're seeing the conditions on track deteriorate like that, I would have expected them to be more ready and not just be in the pit lane with no tires. But it was just a horrible weekend for Leclerc in general. He didn't like the car, to put it in the most simple terms. He said it was driving basically with the downforce you would expect at Baku, which at a higher downforce track like N4 isn't good, obviously. So, and obviously he crashed with Piastri as well, and he broke his floor, broke his front wing, eventually causing him to retire. So, just a horrible weekend for Leclerc. I've noticed, at least recently, with Leclerc, he always has like problems with his car. I believe in, what was it? I don't know if it was Hungary or a race before that, but he was also complaining the car was undrivable. So I'm not sure what's happening on this side of the garage, but it's very strange, and unfortunately it's not yielding good results for his points in championship.
yeah, and I think he's dropped back down behind Sainz again. And yeah, obviously the incident with Piastri, I haven't really seen a replay of that, maybe more than once during the broadcast, but it looked just like kind of a racing incident. And all he did was kind of go over the gravel after that second DRS straight, and all of a sudden they're slower than the Alfa Romeo. Like Bottas was kind of giving him the work in like 15th place. So it didn't take a whole lot for that car to become just horrible, and then they just retired it because.
Didn't Lawson overtake him too?
Yeah,
I think he overtook Leclerc.
Him, yeah.
Yeah, pretty crazy for your debut race to be overtaking Ferrari, but
I saw something.
Yeah, just
he also overtook Verstappen, and it was like the first time. It was like
back, I think
he unlapped himself.
Yeah, he unlapped
and it was
himself.
like the first time that like someone's like passed Verstappen in like a year.
Yeah, I mean maybe he's the next world champion.
Put him in replace Perez with
He's-
Lawson. No.
Yeah, he's overtaking like the best drivers in the sport right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a strange weekend from Ferrari. Sorry, what were you gonna ask me, Charlie?
Yeah, they gotta turn it around. The home fans won't be happy with a retirement after getting passed by the other Italian team. That's horrible. So we'll see. Sainz, another solid weekend. He's kind of doing his thing. I don't know if he even has a podium this year, but he's just putting in solid performances and moving up in the championship. On to Mercedes. Lewis had a bad qualifying when I think the conditions were kind of right for him to fight for pole, honestly. That's kind of tailor made to his best driving abilities, but knocked out in Q2. Russell obviously had a good qualifying, but then it was just really poor strategy from the Mercedes team, and they both kind of did their best to overcome it. And then I believe Russell got a puncture at the end and had to retire after the
I
red
think
flag.
I think he tried to overtake Lando and then like he ran like off the track or something, and then he like dropped down.
Yeah, I don't know, cause
It was like after the red flag restart.
yeah, 'cause he passed Lando, and then all of a sudden they said like, and Russell's dropping down the ladder. So I don't.
No, it's because I think he took it too hard and then like
Okay.
got off the track. Yeah, he just took too much speed into the corner, overtaking Lando.
Yeah. Well.
But yeah, I don't blame Mercedes for like their strategy. I do blame them for sticking with it. I think eventually at one point you have to recognize the wrong strategy and like cut your losses at a point. But the fact that they stayed on the drives for that beginning of the race, I don't think it was that bad of a decision because at that point at least it looked like it would just be a brief shower, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, not hard at all. Probably you can stick on the slicks in those conditions, but my problem with them is just if you see that the track is very wet, like you need to pit, like you need to be able to be flexible. And to be frank, it's surprising that Mercedes weren't because we know how good their strategy traditionally is. Maybe it's not as good now, but back in 2018, 2019, it was very good. I'm interested. We know that James Vallis, one of their strategies, and I think Bottas's engineer from a couple of years ago, he moved to Williams, and maybe that affected their strategy adversely. But yeah, just a bad strategy from Mercedes. They did recover towards the end of the race, but obviously with Russell making his mistake, it wasn't as good. But Hamilton P6 in those conditions, I think it's fine, especially if you had asked them at the start of the race when they were both like 16 and 18. I think that's still a good result.
Speaking of bad, the McLarens had a bad performance. Uh, I know, Kenji, your first thought was Russia 2021 because you love to bring that up. But like,
I predicted it last weekend. I brought it up.
but like, it's just bad. They could have had such a just another good weekend, and it turned out to, I think it was P7 and 9. I think they still got double points, but like
Yeah. P7, P9.
P7, P9. But I don't like, given their past performances, I don't think that they should both be that low. It was just unfortunate, bad pit stop timing and everything that comes with that just kind of screwed over their race.
Yeah.
Unfortunate,
Yeah,
but we'll see what happens in the next one.
yeah, it was just a problem, bad strategy. I know Charlie, you're going to touch on this, but so I don't want to take too much. But yeah, I think it's just kind of like Mercedes, to be honest. We know McLaren have the pace, and you saw. I think Lando was like P. I don't know how where he qualified, maybe P3 or something. But
P2.
I think the rain, yeah, P2. Just another bad strategy from them, and kind of like Mercedes, really just being stubborn. What do you have to add on it, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, it was Lando's strategy at least was up there with Mercedes for how bad it was, because they left Norris out on the softs when it was still raining, and he wasn't doing all that great. I mean, he got passed by Alonso and I think Russell maybe too. Um, and then they pit him like half, like they didn't. Piastri stuck it out all the way, but Norris came in for the inters anyway, but it was way too late, and so they didn't commit to anything and just kind of did in the middle, and then he had to fight through, and he did a good job to fight back up, but just that made him get stuck in all the DRS trains, all that, and he really wasn't on the inters for all that long. So Yeah, I don't know what they were doing. Yeah, I don't know how. It was impressive for him to come back. I thought him and Lewis kind of fought through the field, and then Lewis had more pace than he did. So it wasn't all that great a performance at times for Norris, but I think his car was just fast enough. And then Piastri, I mean, he went all the way through on the softs, and then the mediums and the hards were both kind of bad tires for the conditions, and he was forced to use them because he never used the inters, and so he didn't have the best pace he probably could have. Yeah. McLaren, we'll see how they perform at Italy. Monza, obviously they won there 2 years ago, so should be interesting. Albon and Williams, it was a pretty good weekend on Saturday. It was a pretty good Saturday. What are your thoughts on this team, Kenji? You've kind of latched on to Albon at least.
It was an incredible weekend. I was going into it, to be honest, I wasn't too bullish on Williams going into the weekend just because we know their car is very slippery, very good in the straight line, but not very good at all in tracks of medium or high downforce. So going into the weekend, I didn't predict that they would do very good, and they just proved me wrong. And Albon was fourth in qualifying, eighth at the flag. I think Sargent made his first Q3 appearance in his career, and his race didn't go that well. But yeah, just a great, incredible weekend from especially Albon in particular. I don't have much more to add except that I'm excited for Monza because we know we've been predicting that they would do well there for a very long time. But obviously, I don't want to get my expectations too high because I can set the conditions for disappointment. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they do next weekend.
Yeah, I mean, if they do this well here, I wonder how well they'll do at a track that they're supposed to be very solid at. Moving down the line, the other Alpine, Ocon, he got a points performance. So I think a double point performance for Alpine is very, very it's what we've expected from them. That like P10 around that. But the fact that he could have done better is a little bit sad to see because of how unfortunate that team's been. Gasly got a good race under his belt, but Ocon, the opportunity just sort of got taken away from him, if there even was one. I know it's sort of getting into hypotheticals, but who knows? He could have strung out a really, really solid performance had the race not have been red flagged.
I touched upon this earlier, but I think he was the first one to go into the full wet when that heavy rain came at the end of the race. He did think it was a bad decision, and to be frank, it was at the time because the rain wasn't falling like too hard yet. But yeah, it's just bad luck with the red flag, which allowed everyone to switch tires. Just bad luck, to be frank. But as I mentioned earlier, it's still a good weekend for Alpine. I think they bring home 16 points. So you're not going to catch McLaren at this point, and they're not going to be caught by Williams at this point either. So yeah, just going to be a lonely run to the end of the season, in my opinion, for them.
Yeah, and for how kind of unlucky they are, they've also kind of found themselves in the right place at the right time. Twice now this year, they've gotten 2 podiums. They've gotten, McLaren hasn't had both drivers on the podium. I don't know if Mercedes or Ferrari have even. So, I'd have to check that. But Piastri certainly hasn't got a podium. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty impressive for both drivers to get a podium in a season. And I think you take that if you're Alpine. Let's see, what else happened in this race? Lots of stuff. Stroll, I forgot was even there. I genuinely don't think I saw his car once the entire time. I don't know what he was doing, but yeah, that's all I have to say about Stroll.
Yeah, Lawson's debut performance. I guess we already talked about how it was. You know, he was the better of the two AlphaTauris in the race this weekend. And
I honestly thought,
yeah.
sorry,
No, you got it.
I honestly thought that this was, I was genuinely impressed by Lawson this weekend, considering the fact that the was as difficult as it was, and to finish P13 above Tsunoda, above everybody. I think that's just an incredible drive from him. I keep saying incredible drives, but yeah, it's a great drive from him because it's just stepped into that seat and to finish where he did. I think he equaled Ricardo's best result, or actually I think Ricardo took 12th at his first race, but it's still a very good result from Lawson, and I think he has to be considered seriously at least for the AlphaTauri seat next year.
Yeah, and it was a bad qualifying, as you might expect. I don't blame him for that. I don't know. This track kind of strikes me as not one of the more big ones that people race on frequently when they're coming up to F1. I don't really know why that strikes me as that, but it just seems more kind of local. But he didn't have any running outside of FP3, and then qualifying was bad. I think he was almost 2 seconds off the cutoff time, but he kept up with the pace in the race, and that's all you can really ask of him. So he was good. I hope he performs well. I don't know how long Ricardo will be out. Obviously unfortunate what happened to Ricardo, but he sounded like he said I either hit Piastri or I go and I crash myself. So I think he probably made the better decision.
Yeah, I think he's targeting a return for Singapore, or it's the race after Monza, because I think we have the 2-week break, and with the broken hand, I believe Christian Horner mentioned it would take about a month for an F1 driver to recover from that. So, yeah, just an unfortunate crash with that crash that broke his hand. I think the problem is he just didn't let go of the steering wheel, and it kind of snapped back and broke his hand that way. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what more to add, except that Lawson did very impressive this weekend.
Yeah. Other backmarker teams were they were being themselves. Haas they both finished low, and then the Alfa Romeo, of course, Joe had his big crash.
Alfa Romeo and Haas actually played the strategy right. Joe I think he was probably in P2 for a good 5 to 10 laps. Maybe not that much, but he was in second place for a while, which was kind of fun. But then Verstappen came through and made it very clear that he would not be holding that position for long. Magnussen had a better weekend, which is good to see. He's been kind of disappointing this year. But I was watching the race, and Gunther Steiner came on the broadcast, and they asked him, "Do you think you're going to be able to hold the points?" And he's like, "Probably not, but we'll see." They were 5th or 6th at the time, and he already knew, and there was a big gap, and he knew that they weren't gonna. That car is it's weird. It's really, it's decent in 1 lap pace, but it's just horrible in the race. I have no idea why. So, yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting weekend, and the resurgence of Aston Martin will be fun to watch. Potentially Williams and Alpine could kind of contend for a podium even as we go to Monza. And then we've got another new driver, Liam Lawson. So all sorts of interesting things happened this weekend. And, yeah, it's good to have F1 back. And definitely looking forward to going to Italy for first time this year, actually, after Imola got canceled. So those fans have been waiting for a while, and it should be a good race.
Yeah. On to the games. Yeah. All right. Or the game.
Yeah.
The game.
I've
I
got
was unaware that we were. What do you got for us today?
I've got a higher lower game.
How exciting!
Extremely. I tried to keep it within drivers. No drivers that drove in the. Actually, I guess one of them drove in the 1990s, but other than that, pretty relatively newer drivers.
I guess Sebastian Buemi.
Absolutely not. So it's gonna be pole positions, but with a twist. It's gonna be like the amount of pole positions that you've had with a certain constructor. So, it's a little bit of a. It's the topic's a little out there, but I think it should be interesting. Like Hamilton, he's had poles with both McLaren and with Mercedes. So you sort of have to take that into account rather than how many they've gotten in their career. So the first one, I'm sort of starting out with an easier one, I hope. It's going to be who had more pole positions with this specific constructor, Sebastian Vettel with the Red Bull or Michael Schumacher with the Ferrari.
Schumacher with the Ferrari.
I'm gonna guess Schumacher as well, because I think
Yeah,
the Vettel season
dominated.
there was a lot more good teams.
Correct.
Watch us be wrong.
Yeah. No. This was supposed to be an easy one. Schumacher's at 58 and Vettel had 44. So going down, Lewis Hamilton with the McLaren versus his old teammate Bottas in a Mercedes.
Mm.
I'm gonna go with Bottas.
I'm gonna go with Hamilton just to be different. Because the McLaren was okay. I'm sure I don't know. It's probably Bottas now.
Yeah, Hamilton had more with McLaren, 26 compared to Bottas with 20. Hamilton just took too many away from him. Charles Leclerc with Ferrari versus Fernando Alonso in the Renault.
Man, I know Leclerc is like super good at like qualifying. Charlie, are you looking it up?
No.
No, he's not looking it up. Trust me.
Okay, I know.
Let's see. I have
I
extensive
don't know, man.
knowledge about the 2005 Renault car.
I don't
Yeah.
even.
No,
Yeah.
I don't. I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with Alonso. I feel like he won 2 championships.
Hold on. Can I ask you a question, Tim?
Yeah.
How many? I don't remember how many years Alonso was at Renault for.
I think it was like 5 or 6.
Was it? I think it was like 3 or 4, maybe, because he won like what?
He won
05 and 06?
06, I
He
think.
was with
Yeah.
Renault for 4 years, 03 to 06, and then went to McLaren after.
He went back to Renault though.
He went back
In
in
08.
08 and 09. So
Okay.
I guess
Okay.
6.
I think
but
he got a win too.
So-
I don't,
so
I don't
he
think
got-
he took pole.
So he got pole in. I remember this race. It was Hungary 09. Because that was the Braun year, I believe.
He
And
won.
then
He won the Crashgate race.
yeah, but he didn't
But
take
he
pole
didn't
in that
take
one.
pole,
Malaysia
so-
or Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he didn't win. Let me think. he probably had, I don't know, like 5 or 6 poles in '05 and another 5 or 6 in '06 because he won both those years. So I think just mathematically it has to be Alonso because Leclerc, like we know he's good at qualifying, but the Ferrari just wasn't that good. So I'm gonna go with Alonso.
Leclerc's actually more. His
Really?
qualifying has got him 20 with the Ferrari, but Alonso only had 16.
20 poles?
Yeah, 20 poles.
Really?
Yeah,
Stripper.
With Ferrari?
with Ferrari. All right, so continuing on, we got Fernando Alonso with the Ferrari versus Perez with the Red Bull. And he was with the Ferrari from 2010 to 2014.
Well, Perez only has like 3 poles like in total, right? When I think he took Jeddah twice, Miami once this year. So Alonso with Ferrari. He said he was with them like 2010 to 2013.
2014.
Okay, I think it's Alonso because he was like second in that championship in 2010 and 2012 respectively. I
I'm
believe.
going to go Alonso.
Yeah, yeah.
Alonso has had 4, and you were right, Kenji. Perez only had 3. So it was 1 more. And then, again, Fernando Alonso with the McLaren versus Carlos Sainz in a Ferrari.
The actual fuck.
Damn, when did Sainz take pole? He took it in Britain last
I
year,
forgot
right?
Alonso was at. I'm going to go Alonso.
McLaren. Wait. Alonso
Yeah.
Alonso was with McLaren? Or no, I mean like that's the question, right? Alonso with McLaren?
Versus Sainz in a Ferrari.
Sainz is at
Okay,
least
so
2.
Sainz was on pole last year in Austin and in Belgium as well.
In Austin?
He was also on pole in Britain, right? In 2020. It was last year. I'm stupid.
He was on pole at
Okay, what?
Coda?
I'm pretty sure. Who is? Yeah, anyway. I thought he was on pole in Coda
Oh, yeah, didn't he
last
get
year.
spun around at the start of the... I don't remember.
Yeah, something like that. I don't even remember, dude. I just remember he was on
Whatever, it's-
pole. And then Fernando with McLaren. I don't even remember that.
Well, he didn't
To be honest,
definitely
I was-
didn't get pulled when they were horrible.
No, I think this was
That's
like
how many he
2007,
got in
right?
2007.
Yeah, I think he got probably 1 or 2. Oh, I think he got 2 actually. So I'm just gonna go with Sainz. I don't know. It's pretty
I'll just
close,
go
so
with
it might be
Alonso,
Alonso.
I guess.
Kenji, you nailed it. He had 2 in McLaren, and Sainz has had 3.
See, I got clickbaited because I thought, well, I knew he actually didn't, but there was a video that said Alonso takes pole in the McLaren Honda, but it was just at Q1 where he went fastest by like 5 seconds because he was the only one out there on soft tires or something, and they clickbaited me.
Yeah. Well,
That's why I lost.
Well,
Well,
anyway.
yeah, I knew he wasn't gonna take pole then, so I knew it was a trick question. I just didn't remember he was racing in '07, but once I remembered, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because he like raced for Renault like all the years around that. But
and in Ferrari too.
yeah, he then went to Ferrari and then back to McLaren, and
And
he's bounced around
Alpine
a lot.
Aston
Yeah.
Martin.
Yeah. Well done, Kenji.
I was like trying to read your body language too. That's why I was like looking at the screen.
Me?
Yeah,
I've been looking at myself.
I was looking at you, Tim, because like I thought you were gonna give like a clue, something,
Did
but
I?
you didn't. So
I did not.
no, I couldn't. Yeah, I could. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a different idea for a game that will hopefully be coming next time I do it. I just like completely forgot. Or actually, I guess it's not a new idea. It's just I want to mix it up rather than just do the higher lower every weekend. Although I think it's a consistent one. But yeah. Anyway, I guess thank y'all for listening or watching, and we will see you next. Actually, in just a couple days for the upcoming Monza race.
Listen in.
So, yeah. Thank y'all for listening, and see you later.